Hey everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Transforming Business for the Future, Rethinking Architecture, Empowering Colleagues and Building a High-Performance Culture with Dunelm Technology. We're just going to wait for a few minutes for some more participants to join, and then we'll start off around 12:02. So we'll just wait a couple of minutes for everyone to join, but I can see the participants going up, which is brilliant. Cool. I'll just wait for those to go up. It's fantastic. For anyone who's just joined, welcome to today's webinar, Transforming Business for the Future. So rethinking architecture, empowering colleagues and building a high-performing culture with Dunelm Technology. I'll wait for another sort of 50 seconds while we're waiting for everyone to come in, and then we'll start off. Right, let's get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Ellis Wadsworth, and I'm a Senior Talent Acquisition Manager here at hackajob. And today I'm going to be the moderator of the Transforming Business for the Future, Rethinking Architecture, Empowering Colleagues and Building a High-Performance Culture with Dunelm Technology. So today, some of the topics that we'll be touching on will be what a modern architecture function looks like, what a good culture looks like, as well as the secrets behind high-performing teams, and also the debate between top-down and bottom-up approaches. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in the Zoom control panel, and we'll have some time at the end to go through all the questions with the speakers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Paul Kerrison, Director of Engineering and Architecture at Dunelm. We have Linda Chan, Principal Agile Delivery Lead at Dunelm. And we also have Leanne Orton, People Business Partner, Tech and Product at Dunelm. We also had Paulina, but she's a little bit under the weather, so she won't be attending today's webinar. But that's enough of me talking. Paul, I'll hand it over to you to get cracking.
Cool. Thanks, Alice. Morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Paul, and I'm the Director of Engineering and Architecture at Dunelm. I'm going to talk a little bit today around the next generation of architecture, which I've coined Architecture 2.0, because of course it does need a catchy name. The traditional approach of an isolated group of architects sitting in an ivory tower, cascading pictures and PowerPoints, is no longer really suitable for a modern environment. So I'm going to be talking about what we need to do differently and how we need to think differently to continue to be effective. Just take a step back for a moment and ask the question, what is architecture? So on the left-hand side there, you can see that architecture is typically described across 4 domains: business, data, application, and technology. And quite often, and certainly at Dunelm, we tend to think about the application and technology architecture as being the architecture, but actually it's much more holistic than that. It spans all these different domains. It also needs some level of governance, and it will produce some list of guardrails to help guide us in what we do. The picture on the right I've included because I think we can probably all recognize something in that. Although it talks specifically about infrastructure, I think this is particularly true following at the start of a digital transformation in an enterprise, where you might build a shiny new website and digital channels, but actually behind the scenes, there's some little risky stick that's supporting everything. And actually good architecture, modern architecture, should help identify and then prioritize dealing with that risky stick. A bit about the why. So why do we do architecture? I don't typically like parallels between technology architecture and construction architecture, but I think that the picture on the left does make a good point. So each of those individual elements in the picture makes perfect sense in isolation. But when you start looking at the whole picture, the whole enterprise, and look at those things interacting together, it starts to become chaotic. And I'm sure, again, a lot of us can recognize enterprises that look a little bit like that when you zoom out. The purpose of architecture is all about change. So I think in architecture 1, so the more traditional architecture, it was about managing change. Architecture 2 is all about enabling change. And that's an important difference to make. It's really about sort of greasing the wheels of decision making to ensure that we're safe, and that where we have hard to reverse decisions, enough rigor has been applied, but not too much. And again, that's kind of a key point. Fundamentally, it's about understanding where we are now, where we're trying to get to, although that's likely to change, and then how we go about getting there. And it can help accelerate our efforts by making timely technology decisions, by promoting reusability, and by enabling development speed. So enabling your engineers to move quicker. There's a number of challenges that we're facing into here, but just to call out a few, there's things around assets. So architecture diagrams, we've all seen them. They tend to be just images. They're a point in time. They're hard to access. They can be lost easily. They can get out of date. Decisions are made, but they're unrecorded or they're unclear. We have some principles, but where are they? And if we do have them and we know where they are, quite often they're not followed. And equally, the architect role over recent years has changed as well. And sometimes the ways of working aren't clear there. So a bit about how we're going to do architecture 2.0. So broadly speaking, there's these 3 pillars which will support the vision. And the vision is all about creating a community of architects. It's about having lightweight mechanisms for making decisions and recording decisions. And it's about having a common understanding of our current and future state architecture. So the first is governance. So I'll come on to these in a minute, but this is all about how we assure the change that we're doing. We've got culture, which is how we go about doing the change that we're making. And then we've got modeling, which is about how we communicate the change. And I've got a quick slide on each of these. So governance is quite often thought of as a bit of as a dirty word. So it's one of those words like productivity and things like that, where it can be a bit taboo, but it shouldn't be. And we should demystify that and make it a safe word. And it should be all about creating a safe and autonomous environment that it can accelerate change. So we've done a number of things at Dunelm. We have some review forums, and these operate at different levels for different types of decisions. So those hard to reverse ones or have a bit more formality around them, for example. We have different audiences at those different review forums, and we try to orientate them around how do we say yes rather than a default of no. So that's very architecture 1.0. There's a big gate with an architecture board, very intimidating, obviously going to say no, whereas we try and spin it around the other way. So these people coming together to work out how we can say yes. We have decision management, which is key. The review forums themselves operate like a decision engine that they have no input, they have a conversation and they output a decision. And these decisions are all recorded in a lightweight way. So it's not that huge, big document for every decision, a key design decision document. It's small, it's accessible, it's searchable, and it's easy to use. And the key thing there is it's accessible to all, so we communicate it clearly. And then finally, it's around principles and guardrails. So rather than gates and standards, which is very architecture 1, we have principles and guardrails, which is architecture 2. And the point of these is to enable as much autonomy and as empowerment as possible. So Spotify talk about the golden path, and it's a similar kind of concept to that, whereby we provide enough of a framework that people can operate independently and autonomously within that, and we manage things that fall outside it by exception. And critically, those principles and guardrails are all modeled and accessible to all as well. And the final point on there is about transparency. It's got 2 exclamation marks because it's the most important thing. It's architecture 2.0 is all about communication. The next pillar was around culture. And culture is really key for architecture 2. We need to push the architecture mindset far and wide. So beyond just people who are named architects, we need everyone to start thinking like an architect, and everyone has the right to contribute. It covers our ways of working. So rather than command and control, it's enabling and collaborative. And one of the key things we found useful is, at least initially, is to focus on high value areas to start with, so that there's a pull for architectural assets rather than them being pushed upon people. And we also want to standardize our assets. So it certainly, in the more traditional ways, different people would operate in different ways and produce different types of asset. And we want to try and standardize those. The diagram at the bottom there is from the team topology folks. Architecture 1 is very much on the left-hand side. An architect decides and the team executes. We're probably in box 2, where we have the architects embedded in the teams, but the end game is all about box 3. So everybody starts thinking like an architect, and the architecture decisions are made locally where the most knowledge is. And then my final pillar is around modeling. So rather than having, everyone's seen architecture diagrams, boxes and lines, a massive sort of blueprint for a city kind of diagram. And what we're trying to do now is create a model rather than a series of diagrams that are scattered all over the place. And we modeled the organization and the tech across 5 layers. There's the motivation, why we do stuff, the strategy, which is our high-level goals and objectives, the business, which is how we operate, the application layer, which is how our applications work and interact, and then the technology layer, which is the sort of how our technology works. And the model is more than just a picture. So every element in the model and every relationship in the model exists only once. And then what we do, we can model all these things and create views on them that are tailored for specific audiences. So if we're talking to the operational side of the business, we might focus more on the yellow layer. And if we're talking to the platform side of the business, then we might talk more in the green and the blue area. We use a notation, well, we've been using a notation called Archimate, which is produced by the Open Group. And we make sure that this model is source controlled in Git. So we try and keep our tooling as similar across the board as possible. At the moment, it's administered by the architects, but we're opening it up to all contributors. So the dream state here is we have product folks contributing to the motivation. We have analysis folks contributing to the business layer. We've got engineers adding to the application layer, and then platform engineers doing the technology. And the more people we get involved, the better. And then the final point here is that it is published and accessible to all. So the entire model gets published out as a static website, and that website is available via a URL to everybody within Dunelm. So no matter who you are, you can have visibility of what we do, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And I wanted to try and bring this to life a little bit. So I've used an example that's close to my heart. So I've previously talked a bit about things like pizza as a service and the Internet of Potatoes. And I want to continue that kind of theme of fusing tech with food. I don't know why, but I do. So I've tried modeling the experience of ordering a pizza using our modeling tools. And this is the attempt. So first up is the motivation layer. So this models the reason why we're doing some change. It whether that be a CEO wanting to increase sales figures by implementing a new sales channel, or if it's a hungry me who wants to get full by eating pizza, the same modeling principles apply. So you can sort of see how it's laid out there. I'm hungry, I can't bother to cook, I want to order a pizza. And that gives rise to a set of very high level requirements. I want to be able to order a pizza, I want the pizza delivered, and I want to be able to relax and eat it. And those requirements we can take and align them with business capabilities. So in order for a business to be able to do this pizza operation, there needs to be a pizza selling capability, a pizza delivery capability, and a pizza consumption capability. And then we can drop down into the business layer. So this starts to model, all the stuff in yellow there, starts to model how a business would provide those capabilities. And the capabilities are shown in orange across the top. There's a number of quite generic business services, and they tend to be long-lived and recognizable by most people within the company. So most people would understand that we have this particular business service. But the critical bit really is the bit that's outlined in pink across the bottom. So that is a multi-step process that is required to be able to realize those business services, which realize the capabilities, which realize the requirements that we talked about in the earlier slide. So we can start modeling out how our business actually operates using this notation in a way that's understandable, hopefully, by the vast majority of people in the organization. And it also gives our technology team something to hang the technology off. So we understand the business processes that we're trying to enable, and we understand why we're doing that. And that helps when we drop down to the next layer, which is the application layer. We now know what we want to do and how we plan to do it all, but we can start to describe how tech is going to enable that. And again, there's a bunch of generic, or just like mostly generic application services across the blue layer in the middle there. But the interesting bit really is when we get down to those application components and functions at the bottom. Now, in this example, I've chosen things like a website for ordering and a moped with a sat nav for delivering. But in real life, these application components would be things like your ERP or your warehouse management system or your content management system or your order management system or something you built yourself or whatever they happen to be. And this is where you start saying, these are the technologies we're going to choose to enable those business processes for the reasons stated in the motivation layer. And then the final layer, if you dare, is to delve down into the murky technology layer itself. So this gets really into the nitty-gritty of how the tech works. It's right down to the specifics of the hardware we're going to use and the software that's going to run on it. And to be honest, at Dunelm, we don't usually go down this low. So at this point, we jump out of the model and go into the tooling we're more familiar with, which is things like Lucidchart or whatever. And that's where we actually describe the technical architecture itself. And again, the model allows us to do that. We can jump out to tools at any point from the published static site and go into tooling that's more familiar. So that might be a BPMN tool for business process. It might be Lucidchart for some technical architecture. It might be Confluence for some documentation or whatever. Yeah, and so hopefully this is obviously a bit of a contrived example where we don't really do pizza at Dunelm. Well, we eat pizza, but we don't manage pizzas at Dunelm. But hopefully it helps to highlight how over time you build up this model and it develops into a useful resource for everybody, much wider in the organization. You're always able to go as deep as you're comfortable with. You don't have to go any deeper. And the architectural assets are no longer locked away, but they're available, they're dynamic, and they're easily consumable, which is all key. So my final message really, architecture 1 was all about command and control. Architecture 2 is all about communication and collaboration. And with that, I will finish with a shameless plug for our technology blog. So the URL's there, the QR code is there, and I shall hand over to Linda.
Thank you, Paul. You're making me hungry now with all that pizza talk, and it's hitting lunchtime. So if you can move on to the next slide. Thanks. Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to be exploring culture and high performance in teams. So before we get started, a little bit about me. So my name is Linda Chan. I'm a PADL, which is Principal Agile Delivery Lead, and I've worked at Dunelm for about 6 years. So I love coffee. So you'll see from that image that this is one of the most expensive coffees that I've actually brought. It's in Europe. I was in Austria, Vienna, and they had amazing views, but it come in at about €6 for a cappuccino, which was pretty steep for my liking. I'm a morning person. I love traveling, photography. I love going to the theatre and watching movies, and I love to eat out. So what do I do? So literally, I feel like to describe my role, I'm like a clothing label. I hold all of the care instructions to look after teams, and this includes the extra information of how to iron out processes. So on a day-to-day basis, I'll be helping teams grow and thrive. But here at Dunelm, I've worked across multiple different teams, and I'm interested in helping with processes, ways of working, inspecting and adapting, any continuous improvement tweaks that we can make, experimentation, innovation, and culture. So let's get into it. Next slide, please, Paul. Ooh, culture. So first, let's try and understand what culture is. So it's very immersive, and we're often unaware of its presence and impact. And we just go about our daily routines at work. And we say phrases like, they're not a great culture fit, but what does this even mean? So to deep dive into this, I asked a couple of members of Dunelm in my team in TCB, and I got a whole host of different responses with a few common behaviors cropping up. So here on screen, you'll see lots of responses from the team. There were a few consistent answers, such as collaboration, respect, communication, support, and ownership. And these were a few of the top themes that come up. Next slide, please, Paul. So this is us. So culture is something we share together like an experience. It's intangible and invisible. What underpins culture are the behaviors of people. And to build this, people need to behave together in a certain way, and it becomes the norm of the team. So a few of the things that are dear to this particular team, TCB, are friendship. They look out for each other. There's no particular egos in the team, and they have this mentality of a one for all, like musketeer type thing, where there's no D'Artagnan that comes in as one hero to save everybody. So when things go wrong, there's no blame or humiliation. We celebrate each other and our successes. We're super respectful, and we love to learn. So here's a video so you can get a feel of what TCB are like. It's made from by a previous colleague of mine, Andrew Morrison. So hopefully you'll get a feel of what it's like.
Hello, we are TCB, a team responsible for all things checkout. For those of you who don't know us, let me introduce you to the team. We have Thomas, Linda, Ash, Paul, Rich, Matt B, Matt O, Joe, Michael, Katun, Rachel, Car, Caroline, Goncalo, Pedro, Bruno, Kazim, Sam, T, Francis, Hiback, and Maria. Recently, you may have recognized us from our work on MPOS, Apple Pay, and settlement service. However, we also enjoy long walks in the country, the spring flowers, and the smell of freshly baked bread. So please, if you are ever in need of assistance or have some baked goods to share, hit us up at tcb@dunelm.com.
Thank you, Paul. And on to the next slide. So how do we go about this? How do we go about building culture and high-performing teams? Well, I feel like there are three core parts that are super important to get this right. The first one being team building for that belonging. So we will first try and brand ourselves and find our identity. So we'll design logos and print stickers and make sure that the team know what they're about. Virtually, we'll have really great conversation and banter. We'll discuss movies and TV and just talk about anything that we want to try and further solidify knowing the different members of the team. And out of hours, I see the team playing a lot of games together to further forge this bond and create this friendship. So they'll play a lot of League of Legends outside of office hours though. Also, when we get the opportunity, we love to have in-person gatherings. So all of TCB love going out to eat. So we'll just break bread together. And then with this, we'll connect on a one-to-one level and as a collective and just have lots of communication and discussion. But we never take ourselves too seriously. And obviously, we'll try to have as much fun as possible. The second core element will be psychological safety. So trying to create that safe space for people to thrive in. So it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to show that you're human. We always ask questions and no question is too silly. The team will take risks where appropriate, and it's okay to fail, because this can also be translated to first attempt in learning. A tagline that we often use and know is ask for forgiveness, not for permission. But lastly, will be understanding our team's goals and missions. So we like to promote the teams having team canvases and charters so that understand what they're supposed to be doing, and everyone understands the why of why we're doing things. Having well-defined roles and responsibility helps as well, and setting ourselves short objectives such as, okay, pass. On to the next slide, Paul. So Daniel Coyle defines culture as a set of living relationships working toward a shared goal. It's not something you are, it's something you do. Culture and high-performing teams go hand in hand. So in summary, let people know they belong. So have frequent interactions with each other that are energetic and motivational. Have one-to-one conversations where possible. Think about the future and what we're doing and where we're going, and their own personal growth. And this is the team building element. It's a safe space to speak up, so continuously admitting to mistakes, downplaying your own ideas, being humble where we can, and always asking for other people's input. And this is the psychological safety element. Continuously reminding team members of their purpose, we can show them artifacts such as the company vision, plan on a page, and roadmaps, and using cheesy catchphrases so the team never forget the experience they're trying to create for themselves and for the customers. So the reason that my team are called TCB is because Elvis had a band called TCB, and it's taking care of business. And the song perfectly describes what they're looking for, which is a little less conversation, a little more action, please. So this is the purpose element. And just to bring it all together, you belong, it's a safe space to speak up, and we have a purpose. So high-performing teams are happy and healthy, and this is what we look for at Dunelm. And the next slide, and just a few references. So Culture Code is a brilliant book by Daniel Coyle, and it shows how to build up culture and teams. And Project Aristotle is an article or a paper that Google wrote around how to get this perfect team. So just wanted to say thank you for my last slide. Thanks for listening. Happy Thursday. And to my glamorous assistant, Paul Carrison, for slide turning. And over to Leanne. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. And yes, hopefully, Paul, I'll remember to ask you when to move slides so that we're all in sync. But hello, everyone. I'm Leanne, and I'm the People Business Partner for Technology and Product at Dunelm. I'm going to talk to you about the debate, as Ellis described it, of top-down and bottom-up approaches, what the two approaches are, the pros and cons of each, and how we recently adopted a more hybrid approach in tech at Dunelm to enhance our colleague engagement. So if we could move on, please. But before we get into that, similar to Linda, I just wanted to share a little bit more about myself and my background. So I've been at Dunelm, well, not as long as Paul or Linda. I've been at Dunelm now for just over 8 months. Prior to that, I've worked in multiple industries, so including aerospace, food manufacturing, and healthcare, to name but a few. And also for a broad range of organisation sizes, from startups to large corporate businesses. I was once described as a rare breed, which at the time I wasn't quite sure how to feel about it or how I felt about it. And, you know, are they comparing me to a rare breed of sheep, such as the Swiss Valais black nose that you can see here, which I do often resemble, especially when I'm not in the office. But they were actually referring to someone being in the people space who also has an agile background. So what was a game changer for me from a career perspective was stepping out of HR altogether after 20 years of being in the profession and going into product. So firstly as a Scrum Master and then as a product owner. So not only was it the scariest move I've ever made in my career, some did rather rudely ask me if I was having a midlife crisis. I actually think I was, but regardless. But it was also the best move for so many different reasons. One of which was kind of it throwing me and immersing me into the world of Agile, which in the organization I was in at the time was scaled Agile, or SAFE, as some of you know it. And over time, I became accredited as a SAFE Scrum Master and a SAFE practitioner. But it really did open my eyes into how the principles and the mindset and the ways of working could be adopted into non-software environments, and in particular into the people space to create the ultimate colleague experience, because that's what it's all about. So if we can just quickly move on, Paul, thank you. So getting into the subject matter, what do we mean by top down and bottom up? Simply put, the top down approach to management is when decisions are made solely by leadership and then communicated to the rest of the team down a hierarchical structure. It is a more rigid approach, and it's a very structured style, and is often referred to as the more command and control style that is seen as autocratic. So some of the more traditional industries, such as retail, Dunelm are in the retail industry, healthcare, or manufacturing, do typically apply the top-down management style. Although, interestingly, some of the big players, such as IBM, also choose to operate their whole business that way. It works for them. So, bottom up, what is the bottom up approach? Well, it describes when teams and colleagues are given a voice in decision making. So they have input and can co-create and collaborate on business processes. So let's take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of each approach. If we can click through, please, Paul. Thank you. So there are benefits to a top-down management style, especially for larger teams that consist of multiple smaller teams, let's say. So, for instance, it's a well-known management style. So it's less of a learning curve for new hires when they join the business, and they can adapt to their new organization, to their new surroundings more quickly. The top-down management style also gives clarity. So by communication flowing in one direction, mix-ups and misunderstandings, in theory, happen less often. It also gives more accountability. So when problems do occur, as they inevitably do, it's easier to track them to their source and to diagnose and solve them quickly and efficiently. And my final point is around top-down methods or approach being seen to be much faster when it comes to implementation. So with decision-making taking place at one level, they can be implemented more quickly. So there's some of the advantages of top-down management. And if we move on to look at the some of the disadvantages, let's say. So the top-down approach doesn't work for everyone, and it won't work for every organization. And it has its drawbacks in how it might impact individual team members or overall team morale. So the top-down approach can put more strain on leadership, since all the decisions are effectively made at the top. So, for example, hiring the wrong project manager could impact the whole team and success of a project. So it can be quite stressful for leaders if all of the decision making, all of the input, it's solely on their shoulders. It can also stifle creativity and innovation by giving little room for dialogue and fewer opportunities for collaboration. And it can also lead to disengaged teams who feel that their feedback and opinions aren't valued. And then finally, it creates a greater distance between teams and the decision makers, which ultimately can lead to poorly informed decisions if leaders don't ask for input and feedback from those kind of following those processes at the coalface. It does create that greater distance. So what about the bottom-up approach? If we move on to the next slide. So the bottom-up approach of management is more flexible than the top-down strategy, which is why it's more commonly found in industries where disruption and innovation are a priority. So what are its advantages? So the bottom-up style of management solves many of the problems that come with the top-down approach. It's a great fit for creative teams and industries where collaboration is key. For example, software development and product design. So decisions are more informed. Team members are involved in process design, which again, in theory, reduces potential blind spots. They're involved in that process design, and therefore it's more encompassing, it's more holistic in its view. The bottom-up approach also encourages greater buy-in from team members, as everyone has the opportunity to influence decisions regardless of their seniority or what level they sit within the organisation, leading to team members being more invested in the team's success. And as individuals and teams have more opportunity to give their input, it creates more room for creativity and brainstorming. But as always, there are downsides to any approach. So if we click through, thank you, to some of the disadvantages of the bottom-up method, because there are disadvantages. So if you've ever heard of the expression, too many cooks spoil the broth, might be a bit of a more old-fashioned expression. It's one that I'm familiar with, but essentially, it gives an example of what could be the downside to adopting a bottom-up approach, as when everyone is invited to collaborate, it can be harder to arrive at a decision, and as a result, it can slow things down. But to avoid this, you can consider assigning 1 or 2 group leaders to consider the input and then to make a decision based upon the feedback. So again, there are workarounds with this. And also not everyone is comfortable, as we know, giving feedback, especially with leadership in the room. So that in itself could stifle or limit creativity. But again, let's flip this on its head, and how can we avoid this? You can create different environments for team members to contribute, whether it be small breakout rooms, one-on-one meetings, or even quarterly anonymous feedback surveys. So again, there are workarounds to this. And kind of finally, processes that are designed from the bottom up can also suffer from blind spots that inevitably result in a lack of access into insights from management. So again, how can we avoid this? Let's create a communication or create a communication flow that enables decisions to be aligned with company goals, so that we're communicating and collaborating and creating that transparency with all levels across the organisation to ensure that alignment. So if we can just move on, Paul, thank you. So what approach has typically been taken in tech at Dunelm? So if we look at how engagement survey feedback has been cascaded and actioned in the past, so historically, more of a top-down approach has been taken, and feedback has been shared with colleagues when the results have become available, and the leadership team have come together and formed an improvement plan. So this is perhaps where the "you said, we did" phrase may apply, because you gave this feedback and this is what we've done with that feedback. So don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing whatsoever. You said we did, it's not a bad thing. Action is being taken to improve the colleague experience, and that is what is important, and it's pretty damn important. So it's not saying that you said we did is not a good way to move things forward. But in Tech at Dunelm, we wanted to do something different, something that was more collaborative. And so we adopted more of an agile approach and mindset to what we did. If you can click through, please. Always amazing. Thank you. So although Dunelm are in the more traditional retail industry, like many businesses, we too are fast tracking our cloud, agile, data and digital transformations and are competing for top talent. So creating the best colleague experience is really, really important. And so following the engagement survey in November last year, we took more of a blended or hybrid approach to how we fed back the results and how actions were formed. So the initial comms were still top down. We felt that that was really important to help interpret the data, to share that data, and also outline what the data was suggesting. Plus, it was giving a consistent message to a broader audience. So we were deliberate in ensuring that the feedback was shared timelier or in a timelier fashion and in a structured way. So it was shared top level to all of tech at one of our weekly huddles. And then each chapter or center of enablement then came together straight after that initial cascade to review their functional results and to talk openly about the feedback. But in addition to being more agile with how we shared the feedback, we wanted to make sure that any improvements we made were going to make a difference from a colleague perspective. So we sought volunteers to come forward and to form an engagement, and we formed an engagement squad with the intention of co-creating an improvement plan that was shaped through the eyes of the colleague and that would be seen to be value adding. So we felt that this approach leaned more towards the "you said, we empower you to own" category, and we want to create that ownership amongst our colleagues within tech at Dunelm. Plus, it's in line with our shared values at Dunelm of keep listening and learning, stronger together, act like owners, and long-term thinking. So we were ticking all the boxes as well by doing this. So together with Linda, I was very grateful, Linda, we held a session with the newly formed engagement squad to review the data, to identify meaningful improvement actions, and to prioritize them. And together, we co-created a plan by stimulating creativity and making sure that any improvements that the squad arrived at really hit the mark and would add value. That was really important to us. They had to hit the mark and they had to add value. So members of the engagement squad, once they'd formed the plan, they then presented their proposal or proposed plan at a huddle and are currently working through the actions that center around a kind of a focus area of connection. So how we connect with each other, how we're connected with the business, especially in the hybrid way of working that we have. Connection is absolutely paramount. So it is the first time that we've tried this and that we've tried a different approach. But from the feedback we've received so far, it's going well. And the squad are coming together on a fortnightly basis. We're talking through the actions. We're having updates on progress so far. As in the vein of kind of taking an agile approach and retroing what we could do differently or what we could do better, is we could communicate where we're at a bit better, but that's a learning that we've recently arrived at and are going to do something about. But the team are invested, and they're invested in making sure that their colleague experience is as good as it could be, and they know the importance of that colleague experience, and they can see that we value their input. So it's early-ish days. We have a new another survey landing shortly, but yeah, hopefully sharing the approach that we've taken at Dunelm is insightful and may have kind of triggered a few thoughts as to what you could possibly do differently yourselves within your own organisations. And yeah, I'd be happy, along with Paul and Linda, to answer any questions that you may have about our presentation. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Paul, Linda and Leanne, then for your presentation. So I'll quickly get into the Q&A section of the webinar. So we've had some pre-submitted questions prior to the event. So Paul, first one for you. What are the IT infrastructure best practices in cloud that Dunelm has implemented?
There's so I'm probably not the ideal person to answer this. So it's, but out of the group here, I think I can probably answer it from a high level point of view. So we obviously have a whole load of platform specialists that will look at the infrastructure. The first thing I'd say actually is going to sound a bit flippant, but not having any is a good start. So get rid of infrastructure. So at Dunelm, we've gone pretty hard on the whole serverless route. So we have the largest AWS Lambda implementation in Europe, second largest in the world. And that means we don't have to worry about infrastructure. And in the more traditional sense, we don't have servers, we don't have any of that paraphernalia that comes with it. So we're in the cloud and we're serverless. We can concentrate the engineers on building what matters, and the platform peeps can get on with some stuff that matters to them as well, rather than configuring servers. A couple of other points on that. So the other one is around partners. So we're heavy into AWS, but we work with them on a partnership basis. We spend a lot of time collaborating with them on certainly on the more sort of the newer end of the stuff that we're trying to do, but equally with all our software as a service providers as well. So getting the right providers, we've got some pretty gold standard partners and providers out there, and we work really closely with them. And then the other thing I would say actually is around automation. So in terms of best practice, automate everything. The default should be automate it. Everything is code, including your infrastructure if you're going to have any. And there's probably some points around DevOps ways of working and DevOps mindset. And FinOps is one that's coming up more recently. So we have a cross-functional group that are actively trying to optimize our costs in the cloud. So looking at all aspects of it, tagging all our assets, making sure that we can start attributing cost to the thing that's using them. So our individual products and services will all have a running cost, ideally near real time. We're not quite there yet.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Paul. We'll stick with you. I'm probably going to bombard you quite a lot of questions here, Paul. Does Dunelm have both a large B2B and B2C presence?
So we are a consumer-focused retail organization. B2C is our bread and butter, and pretty much everything we do is B2C. There probably are some aspects of B2B, but it's minor compared to B2C. So yeah.
Perfect. I've got a question for Linda now. Linda, what do you like the most about the Dunelm culture, would you say?
I've been here for 6 years, and throughout the 6 years, it's just been such a great atmosphere to work in. Everyone's very friendly and super chilled. We feel safe and trusted, and Dunelm really take care of our well-being as well. So we have a charity partner called Mind. So the company will pay a lot of attention to our health and well-being, and it's just fun. And there's a lot of investment into our own learning and growth. So every month we'll get our own learning days, and it's just generally very fun. And we have a lot of different activities like hackathons, and Dunelm is the home of homes, and it makes you feel like at home with everybody else, and it doesn't feel like a struggle to come to work, really, which is what you want, really.
Yeah, sounds ideal. Perfect. Thank you, Linda. Leanne, so a quick question here, just from my side. for example, if you're hiring for your team or for Dunelm, what would you ideally look for in a candidate, like from like technical skills, from soft skills? I know the tech skills will change depending on the position, but just as an overall, soft skills and the type of personalities you look for with Dunelm, what would you ideally look for?
Okay. Obviously, what is important is the technical capabilities that an individual has, but something that we promote quite strongly for or during our interview process is the how things are done, so the behaviors. So we would look at both the what, so the capabilities, and the how, because it's not just about being a cultural fit. It's about being a cultural add. And so we want individuals to join our business that, yes, are a good fit with the organization, but also have something to bring to the table and can further add to that culture. So not sure if that answers the question, but it's essentially it's more multifaceted. It's the what and how that we look at. It's really important.
Yeah, it's probably my bad. Quite a vague question there, but I think it's good to know if you are applying for a role. So, Paul, back to you. What strategies should businesses use to effectively transform their tech infrastructure? Quite a juicy question there.
Yeah, I think it's sort of similar to how they transform anything within the business, actually. So I think the key thing is to, certainly from my point of view, is to understand your vision. So where are you going? Why are you doing it? What do you hope to achieve from it? And once you've got that vision, again, I'm going to go back to my architecture slides now. Once you've got that target, you come back to where are we now? So you do some sort of assessment about what's your current state of play. And then you can start to prioritize which bits in the vision you should start to go after as a priority, because they're the most important. And that gives you a roadmap. And a roadmap, I'm deliberately not saying plan there, because all of this stuff's going to change. Your vision isn't a set target; it's going to shift around. But your roadmap should be flexible to meet that. I think there's some other things that you need to consider. So one is around engagement. If you're doing in this case, a tech infrastructure thing, it isn't just about the tech. Your audience isn't just your tech people. You need to get those operational side of the business, those stakeholders involved early as well. And then I suppose there's some aspects around training and monitoring as well. So training, you need to make sure your folks are up to speed and no one's getting left behind or feels like they're being left behind. And similarly, if you're going to be going on this track and you are going to be transforming, you need some metrics that make sense and that measure what matter, and you need to monitor those closely as you go, so you can ensure and assure that you're going in the right direction and it's having the right results. There's nothing worse than heading off and then a year down the road, oh, we're not actually making the difference we wanted to. So I think that, yeah, similar to any other transformation, I think if you get those things in place, you're well set.
Perfect. And then just sort of on the topic of transformation, I think this will probably be the last question we have for today. What are the key benefits of transitioning to a cloud-based tech solution or cloud-based tech solutions?
Yeah. So quite often people say cost, and I don't think that should be in the top 5. So I'm not going to put it there at the top deliberately. I think your biggest advantage is flexibility. So if you're coming from a more data center place, the ability to be able to make use of and flex your estate and quite rapidly without having to consider hardware considerations is a massive benefit. That's got to be the number one for me. And then there's a whole load of stuff around all of the abilities, so scalability, reliability, all the standard non-functional requirement type things. We see that particularly at Dunelm. So we haven't just lifted and shifted our stuff into the cloud. We've redeveloped our assets so that they're cloud native. So I talked a little bit earlier about the serverless footprint we've got, but that gives us virtually unlimited scalability on the things we've deployed in that way. Whereas before we might be thinking, oh, it's coming up to a peak trading period, we better go and add some extra instances of a big e-commerce platform. we don't have that consideration anymore. It scales up to where it needs to be when peak loads come through at, say, Christmas, where it goes very high. And then afterwards, it just scales back down again very gracefully. So we're only paying for what we use. And that is harder. It's not impossible, but it's harder to do with a non-cloud based tech solution. That cost is a factor. So, but I think rather than being a cost reduction, it's the ability to flex your costs and to optimize your costs over time. So you can, there's a lot, you've got more flexibility to address what's costing you money in the cloud than otherwise. The list goes on, actually. The things around security, things around disaster recovery. So, if you're in Amazon, you automatically start running across effectively multiple data centers, although they're sort of hidden from you. And you obviously can take that as far as you need to. And performance is a big one. So this list is going to go on for a long time. But yeah, flexibility will be the main one.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Paul. So yeah, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today's webinar. But I just want to give a big thanks to Paul, Linda and Leanne for their presentations and sharing insight into architecture, culture, and the top-down, bottom-up approaches. Before we end today's session, I just want to add that the team at Dunelm are actively hiring right now. And as a follow-up, we will provide the link for their careers page where you can find a list of open positions as well as their benefits. And if you are interested in career opportunities with Dunelm, please register via the form in the email and we will get back to you. But yeah, I just want to say a big thanks to our three speakers today and everyone that's participated and joined the webinar. I hope you found it really, really informative. Thank you so much, guys.